In a recent update, Bungie explained some changes that are going to be happening to how you will end up progressing your character in Warmind. Today we're going to go over some of those changes, why I think they're necessary, and what else still needs to be done. So in the post, they say that their original goal when creating Destiny 2 was to make getting to the cap easier for everyone. The problem was that that's boring, it's too easy, and there's nothing that really requires max level except for Prestige Nightfall, which has no rewards attached to it other than an emblem which only requires a score of about 80,000 to get the hardest one. They even say in another update that most people have most non-quest exotics at this point. What'll be happening in Warmind is that progression will be slowing down. The goal with this change is to, quote, bring back meaning and accomplishment to achieving the power cap, giving players a sense of progression when they come back to play each week, and to reward players who engage in a broader scope of Destiny 2's endgame, end quote. They also reduced the importance or value of grinding activities like public events for exotics, and reduced the impact of clan engrams on progression into the endgame. The soft cap for Warmind will be power 340, which means you can get to 340 doing almost whatever. The hard cap in Warmind is 380, with mods bringing you up to 385, and to push past 340 will require you to engage a bit more with endgame content and milestones. How the game calculates your loot drops is still the same. It still looks at all the gear you have across the entire game and calculates your highest level possible, then gives you rewards based on that. Getting from 370 to 380 will take about the same amount of time as it takes to get from 340 to 370. So once you hit 370, things are going to again slow down to make hitting max level actually an accomplishment. Clan engrams will continue to give large boosts up until about 340, and then after that they won't be as impactful on your gearing process. Other changes are happening in order to prevent any exploiting the creation of multiple characters in order to gear up. Exotic quests are soft capped at 260, 300, and 340 respectively, depending on which expansions you own. So you won't be able to just create multiple characters and run those exotic quests over and over again in order to gear up faster. Farming exotics for power has been basically removed. Exotics should operate like legendary engrams now with regards to the power gains that you get, as opposed to giving you a huge boost of power like they do now. Basically, things are slowing down and you're going to need to complete more of the end game level activities in order to level up. That is definitely the case right now, but that concept will be pushed a little bit harder in Warmind. Hitting the level cap should be a much bigger deal than it currently is, and I'm glad that Bungie is starting to see that. But as I said earlier, level cap is both too easy and completely pointless outside of one activity, and that one activity is also regarded as completely pointless. Gaining power needs to actually matter to do activities in the endgame, but I don't think it's a great idea to just extend the time it takes to get max power if it continues to not matter at all. This is part of the reason that I was happy about Escalation Protocol in Warmind getting a difficulty boost. The power level on the enemies is probably going up, which means that being max level is actually going to be valuable instead of just out-leveling everything all the time. The Prestige raid should be max level, but even when it was max level, it didn't matter to most people, although for a different reason, which we'll talk about. Bungie has also said that Leviathan will not have its level cap increased due to the fact that increasing the level cap on the activity would block people without the expansion from getting the achievement, which means that they fail their console certification. So hopefully Bungie can figure out a way to make the endgame continually challenging. However, Bungie is in a very interesting predicament. There are multiple issues with loot in the game right now. We, the community, want high-quality loot that feels impactful. Most loot in the game is the opposite of this. We want this loot to drop in a variety of ways. Variety? Is that how we spell words? We want this loot to drop in a variety of ways. Long-term grind, lottery RNG style, achievement-based, plus your standard raid, trials, etc. But then, we also want a lot of loot drops from almost every single thing that we do. A raid piece from every encounter, 4 to 5 drops after strikes in Crucible, exotics from our public events. I think part of the issue was that public events were too good for a long time for gearing up, but nerfing public event rewards would have made everyone mad, despite it, I think, being the right thing to do. We get a lot of drops from everything. So, would you rather have a ton of drops with not as much of an impact, or fewer drops with greater impact? Because me personally, I'd be alright with fewer drops that actually make me feel like I'm getting cool stuff, instead of just being bombarded all the time with a lot of trash. But Bungie needs to work a lot on the cool stuff end of things because of how much they've stripped down perks and upgrading in this game on both armor and weapons. Besides your top perks, Outlaw, Kill Clip, Rampage, Explosive Rounds, maybe a couple of others, everything else needs to be made more compelling across the board. Again, the Prestige Raid comes to mind. People thought of this activity, the pinnacle PvE endgame activity, as pointless, because all you got for doing it was a purple glow on your armor. The majority of other perks in the game are incredibly subtle with what they do. Accurized rounds, armor-piercing rounds, tactical mag, steady rounds. These all give you what stats? Anybody know? Probably not off the top of your head, which is part of the problem. They offer the slightest of adjustments to your weapon, with the average player probably unable to tell the difference between any of them in a blind test. If we had more perks that were more memorable or stronger, they could be more rare as well, leading to more impactful loot. Outlaw into Desperado via the Redrix's Claymore is a perfect example. This is a weapon that everyone knows is capable of being really strong. Therefore, Bungie made it rare, but it's also rare because it is strong. When you have weapons with random snooze fest perks on them, they don't create any real memories or have any sort of an impact. This is what the current loot system emulates. There is no impact. There is no wow factor. There are just many gunsmith materials. So while I do think a better system would be to grant fewer items that are more impactful, we need more impactful items in the first place. We need more interesting loot. Armor doesn't have perks anymore. Player builds aren't a thing anymore. Not that they really were in Destiny 1, but even less so in Destiny 2. We've lost any sort of way to have an identity in this game besides what shader we're wearing, when you should be able to form an identity through the loot that you wear and the skills that you choose to fit what kind of playstyle you're looking to play. None of this exists. The range role that Bungie was hoping for, where one player was the sniper role and one player was the close range role and another guy's the mid-range role and all that, really never ended up being a thing because the game never needed it because it was too easy and it was too hard to really make an identity for yourself. I think for loot to become more interesting, to have a more interesting loot chase, to have loot be more impactful, or at the very least to have the loot chase last longer, people need to be okay with getting slightly fewer items. On Bungie's end, they need to add more reasons to incentivize getting max power level, on top of the fact that they need to add more compelling loot to set activities to motivate people to actually run them. Are there other things that need to be done on top of that? Sure. Biggest thing is more systems in the game to get people paired up with each other so that they can actually run those activities. But loot probably needs to be adjusted first so that you can regrow a population that actually wants to run those activities to get those items. Do we have time for bonus thought? Yes, we do. So this was supposed to be in my Warmind thoughts video, but to keep things short, I'm stupid. The context is where I was talking about why something like Redrix's Claymore is good for the game. We kind of repeat some points from earlier. But let's take a look at the Prestige version of the raid. Everyone complained that since the loot was only cosmetic in nature, it was pointless to go get because it just made you shiny. The Prestige raid is supposed to be the pinnacle PvE endgame activity in the entire game. The hardest thing to get the best loot, where you need to be a good player to get the loot. endgame loot should matter. Nobody ran it because it wasn't compelling. But now, Bungie introduces a very compelling piece of loot in PvP, where the goal is to have a larger percentage of the people who play that activity, PvP, than the people who play the Prestige raid get said item, and all of a sudden people are outraged that this clearly good item can only be obtained by moderately good players. So, we're mad when the loot is pointless, but then also mad when the loot is good and people feel obligated, perhaps motivated to get it? Is this two different sets of people talking? Yeah, probably. Are there other problems related to this? Sure. I'm talking about PvE versus PvP. The competitive playlist for PvP is barren, solos versus groups, etc., etc. I get it. But I just thought it was a weird juxtaposition in the community that so many people complained about prestige loot, but then a lot of people also complained about compelling loot. Anyway, that's all from me on progression in Warmind and loot. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.
Maybe a late
Scoop
substitution.
TD.
Well, I'm seeing if he actually still wants to, but
Yeah.
What?
What? Bro, what the f is going on? Whoop DD scoop. Whoop 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 DD scoop. Okay. Dude, I'm so sad right now. Why is this man saying whoop DD?
No,
scoop?
wait,
What?
what?